So here we are, outside, walking the doggy, connected. I'm listening to a podcast, streaming. And then I thought, how did we get there? How did we get from having no connection, no internet, to a wired connection, to a Wi-Fi connection, to a 5G connection? And then I thought, we need to talk to Fred Niehaus. Fred is actually one of those people who were there, were at the foundation of Wi-Fi. Enjoy the show. All right. Go.
Hello and welcome to our new episode of the Basement series. For this one in particular, we've been waiting for so long, and finally we were able to bring our amazing guest to our virtual studio.
Absolutely, because today we're going to talk about the history of Wi-Fi, and actually with a person that wrote the history of Wi-Fi. With no further ado, welcome, Fred Niehaus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So my name is Fred Niehaus, and for those who don't know, I've been in the computer industry since 1980, when I was about 20 years old or so. And basically, I was doing two things. I was actually at 20 years old or so. I was working as a police officer because they had all the fun tools. They had computers, and I liked those, and they had access to that. They had access to two-way radios. I loved those. They even had high-speed wireless back then. Those were called bullets. There's no wire on one of those, you know. But anyway, I was working there, and I passed by an industrial park. A sign said Techmar, T-E-C-M-A-R. Turned out to be Marty's Technology, and it was the first company, one of the very first companies to make peripherals for the IBM PC. Wow. You know, so I'd started out doing, you know, as a bench technician. We would basically solder and wire and build things. And in the middle of all of this, IBM came to our company. It seems that there's a long story, I don't want to go into it, but IBM came and said, be our partner. And this was 1980 or so.
Wow.
And we ended up making the very first expansion chassis, clock boards for PCs, all of this nonsense. And we were in Comdex or Jacob Javits in New York, somewhere like that. And Marty Alpert, Marty's Technology, he comes up with this. And the guy keeps bugging him. And back then, IBM released the very first PC. We're next to him, the only company on planet Earth with 10 things that would go in it. And this guy kept bugging Marty, you know, and that guy was Michael Dell. And turns out we're going to find out a little bit more about some things that we ended up doing with Dell in the past. But anyway, so I worked at that company for about 10, 12 years, something like that. And they were relocating to Colorado. And I'm like, well, crap. By that time, I'm a tech support manager. I've got a team. We talk, you know, we got tech guys that can speak Mandarin, Italian. And I decide, you know what, I'm not going out without a fight. So I took our team and fished them to a little company called Telxon. And Telxon back then was early wireless. They were doing, Telxon's whole purpose in life was to do inventory control, barcode reading, things like that. And they had a walkie-talkie like this. And they literally had married a barcode reader to it, a little like a wand. And you could go bloop, 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 bloop. And then you could say how many items you have in the store and all that. And that way the major stores could update their milk and bread, whatever. You know. But that was what they were doing. Then a large rental car company came and said, could you do our cars? You know, we have cars come in, and we want to be able to inventory and know when the car's in, so we can re-rent it out again quickly and stuff. So again, something similar with a wand barcode. Pretty soon, you know, all things wireless, barcode reading, all of that happens because you're solving a problem, right? So that little wand, after a while, got to be problematic. You know, people, whoa, wand, I hate this. Beep, you know. So now we have a gun that can read barcodes. So all that got tied in, and we were using these conventional radios. That radio I was just showing to you actually has a Telxon logo on the back of it.
Wow.
And has a frequency of 461.0625 megahertz. So we're at 460 meg, right? Well, that's conventional radio.
Yes.
You can't move fast data. So, but you can do inventory control, barcoding, little things like that. So we started doing that.
What year are we talking, Fred?
We're talking 1993, 94.
Okay, all right.
Something like that. Okay.
So pre-802.11.
Pre-802.11 with conventional radio. Now, there was something called the ISM band, Industrial Scientific Medical Band.
Yeah.
And that was being used by hospitals and experimental things. You know, maybe you're an auto plant and you're doing not inventory, but production control. You're using those frequencies. And they were at 900 meg initially, 900 megahertz, and 2.4 gig. So at the time, we made those products as well. We had an early radio product that could use 900 meg. And to give you an idea, if you look at 900 meg, this is a Yagi or a directional antenna for 900 meg. Now, if you take that and you put a 2.4 directional antenna next to it, look how much smaller it is, right? The higher the frequency you go, the smaller the radio wave.
Yeah.
So to just recap that, 2.4, 900, and I'm a ham radio operator. That's what 400 megahertz looks like. So we're doing that, and as we're doing this barcode reading, all of a sudden we need this faster throughput, right? Because of POSs, you know, and we're like, piece of what? No, you know, point of sale terminals, right? So these computer terminals had early Ethernet on it, and they wanted us to get over and move Ethernet data, right? So we thought, okay, we could do that, but we can't do it with conventional radio. Now, there was a company up in Canada called Telesystems, and we were Telxon, right?
Is that from Allied Telesystems, or is that another company?
No, it's Telesystems SLW. It was a company started up in Canada, and they were Telesystems was the very first company to ever get approval when the FCC and the DOT, which or DOC, Department of Communications in Canada, both of those at the same time approved ISM. And Telesystems had a radio, and it looked just like this little square box.
Wow.
This little square box came in 900 megahertz and came in 2.4 gig. That's all that was there at the time. They get approval for this radio. We buy Telesystems. We need that technology, and we're going to be using those radios going forward. We buy that, we bring it down to Akron, Ohio, and we rename it Aeronet. Now, we were going to just absorb it within Telxon, but the problem was Telxon was a competitor to a lot of people that made barcode reading and other things. You know, it's like, I'm not going to buy a radio from you when you're
the competitor. Yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
So we thought, let's spin it off. We'll call it Aeronet. Okay. And that was probably, probably in the, it was probably in the early 90s, 93, 94. We're going to, we don't get to .11b till 1999. So remember, this is all coming to fruition, right? I'm working at Telxon. I call one of my buddies that worked at Techmar with me at the time, and I said, hey, Mark, there's this new company we're forming called Aeronet. You need to try to get over there. You need to be over there. Well, what do I need to be there for? And he leaves his consulting company that he was working for, and he joins Aeronet. Now, I'm at Telxon. He's at Aeronet. There are some really early people that come together to build this radio, right? So, and I've got dates and times and some notes, but I'm not going to look. I'm just going to kind of tell you where we're at, and we'll figure it out. So anyway, we get together, and Telesystems comes out, and we make this. Well, we made some early products. Then we made this product.
Yes,
this
we know
is
this
the Aeronet
one.
4800.
Yes.
This is the first product that actually did 802.11b.
Yes.
There was one exactly like this that didn't do it, that had this radio in it and did pre-standard Wi-Fi, right? Pre-standard wireless. Well, the thing about it is this was really cool, and the engineer, has long since retired, as I just recently did in 2020. But the engineer that put that together was, it was a lot of engineers, but the principal one was Stuart Norman.
Yes.
And we called this Stuart Operating System, SOS, and and everything was written by Stuart on this AP, right? And you could do things like plug a serial port into this, and you would instantly get a menu. And you could do things with this product you couldn't do with the later Aeronet products.
Wow.
You could do things like Telnet by MAC address to something that wasn't even linked. I mean, he had done a marvelous job putting this all together. But there was a small problem. A really, really large auto company, and I'll out them, it was Ford Motor Company. We did their their Kentucky truck plant, a bunch of other things. But Ford looked at us and said, we're not going to buy this product. And we're like, well, why not? I mean, it's a great product.
Yeah.
Well, if Stuart gets hit by a bus, you don't have a company. And we thought about that for a second, and it's like, well, if something happens to him, he's wrote all this code. It's here.
Yeah.
He's the only one that knows it all.
There was a single
And
point of
we were
failure.
doing-
Yeah.
Yeah, single point of failure, and you can't have that, right? And there were large retail companies that would have a problem with our product, and we'd get Stuart up at 3 a.m, and he'd write a line of code and fix it for them, and we'd go forward, right? But the goal was Ford wouldn't buy this darn thing till we could get to an operating system that they could understand. So we asked them, what the hell do you want us to write it on then, right? And they said, well, I wish you would use a company called VxWorks. Kind of hard to read it up in the corner there. VxWorks is a Wind River operating system. So we hired a guy named Victor Griswold. And Victor, his whole job was to copy everything Stuart did. Stuart, if you burp over here, I need you to burp over here. And we made this new AP a little bit smaller in size,
It was a 350.
Go up like that or go up like that. Anyway, it ran the Wind River operating system VxWorks, right? Well, we lost a lot of cool things going to VxWorks. I mean, we couldn't Telnet by MAC address anymore. We couldn't, just little things that, that was different. But he did a great job with it. So we're doing all of that. And while we're doing that, we have this bake-off with a large company called Kroger. And Kroger is a grocery store. They were looking at our early products, and this predates what I just talked to you about just by a little bit. And they looked at products by Telxon and Symbol Technologies,
Yep.
right? Symbol also did barcode reading. Symbol was a wizard at frequency hopping. That's what they did, frequency hopping technology.
Yep.
We had kind of both. We had direct sequence, which is what Wi-Fi is based on, and we also had some frequency hopping stuff. We go into the grocery store or whatever with both in a bake-off, and Kroger picks us. So it's like, okay, they like DS. And we're like, why do you like DS? It's faster than frequency hopping. Frequency hopping can be more reliable because on small data bits, because you're hopping across the band. So if you've got interference here and here, it'll hop over between it all, and it'll get through. That's why they use Bluetooth. If you don't need anything with fast throughput, that works. If you need throughput, you need DS. That's why. So they picked us for the DS technology. Along about that time, IEEE was starting to put together something called 802.11, right? So they led with DS, and I don't know if it was because we won that and we had a lot of traction in that, or whether some engineer just picked it. I wasn't there in that realm, but suffice to say, 802.11b took off, started to take off. Took a while for that thing to get traction. Like I said, this AP I mentioned came out in 1998, so it was 1998-99 that .11b was formed.
And what was barcode scanning was a use case? Was there another big use case? Because it wasn't the cell phone.
Funny you should mention that. What was Ethernet back in that day? Ethernet was 10 megabits.
Oh, yeah.
If I came to the party and told you I had 1 megabit throughput, 2 megabit throughput, and we even had, Aeronet even had 4 megabit throughput by bonding channels. We were bonding channels in 1998 or 5. You know? So anyway, it's like not interested, big yawn.
Yeah.
As soon as we hit 11 megabits, and you knew your Ethernet was 10. Now the truth of the matter is, in radio, it generally halves the throughput as you go through. You know. But
on paper,
anyway, on paper you had 11 megabit. So now you got 10 meg Ethernet, 11 meg wireless.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We want to do that then, right? Now it's getting traction. Now instead of barcoding, you had Ethernet registers. So we would put an antenna like this on top of the register, and we'd run the wire back out into a computer down at the bottom of the register that plugged in, and it was fixed, right? And we had a device called a universal client. This is something not too many people see, and when they show up on eBay, I see people buy them awful quick. But this thing here was the mate to this AP.
Yeah.
So you could take this, plug your Ethernet port in it, and you're doing bridging.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
Because there's no clients at the time, right? So now we're doing wireless bridging, and that's taking off. I mean, we got ISPs, people trying to send antennas and moving around the buildings. All of that's taking off, right? This was another Stuart Norman creation. And what was so cool about it is if you open it up, you know, it had a PC card, an early PC card, right?
Is that a Raspberry Pi?
And it had what?
Is it a Raspberry Pi?
No. Yeah, it's like a Raspberry Pi when you think about it. And so anyway, to take long story short, it had a serial port. Remember I told you that you could just plug in and get a console menu? If you did that and you configured it just right, you could then yank this off. That was the Ethernet board. Throw it away, and now there's no Ethernet board. Guess what? I could plug my mouse into that thing and mouse around wirelessly. I could send serial across that. It was phenomenal, right? So we did all of that. When IEEE started coming to fruition with .11b, we needed client cards, right?
Yeah.
So we made a bunch of different client cards, just like that red Aeronet one. We had a red, PCMCIA card, right?
Remember that one?
So we made that card, but the problem is IEEE 802.11b wasn't really ratified at the time; it was in flux, and that we
the
needed
Wi-Fi alliance didn't exist yet, right?
No, Wi-Fi. Here's the thing. I'm getting there. So here's what happened. There was no interoperability. We were kicking butt with what we had, but it was considered proprietary architecture. And remember, things that come to life proprietary first. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to digress just a bit. Power over Ethernet. Power over Ethernet, Cisco put together, okay, because there was no power over Ethernet.
Cisco inline power.
And when you take early Wi-Fi, it wasn't until we got to the Aeronet 350 series APs, and by the way, this was used as a bridge for 11 meg on lots and lots of devices. Okay, wasn't till we got to that kind of thing that the need for interoperability started to become really strong, because you now need to have a client card, and now you need to be able to talk to anything wireless. So this was probably 1998, 99-ish, when Phil Bellinger, who was a marketing manager with Aeronet at the time, he goes, we got to get this stuff interoperable, right?
Yeah.
So he calls at one of the Comdexes or Supercom, whatever the hell was going on at the time. He got these different manufacturers together, and he said, we need to create a standard for wireless Ethernet, because that's what it was. It was wireless Ethernet.
Yeah.
So we need to be compatible, and to make sure that no company has a competitive edge or is better, because remember, with PoE, when Cisco did PoE, it was us. Yeah. When the standard came around, the people at IEEE, the competitors, if you have a product to go to market, you want to go right now. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a product, you want to kick sand in that fire, pee in that fire, do everything you can to stop it until you get to where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
So by the time other companies got to PoE, they said, well, Cisco, you've had PoE since, you got a significant advantage. Let's take the polarity and reverse it. Now you got to be standard like everybody else, and you got to go out the gate the same time we do. Right? So sometimes standards can shoot you in the foot because they might make the standard inoperable with what you had in the proprietary just because they don't want you to have an advantage, right? I mean, so long story short, Phil Bellinger gets these companies together and says, we're going to create a nonprofit, and we're going to call it WECA, Wireless Ethernet Compatibility Alliance. Okay?
WECA.
WECA. Okay,
what a great name.
Sounds like a great name, unless, of course, you're a church in Canada, West Edmonton Christian Association, which is Wi-Fi, or if you had already noticed that WECA.org was taken by Westchester Emergency Communications, a ham radio group in New York, for many reasons, we didn't want to be the Church of Wireless. We didn't want people tying us into these ham radio guys, even though I'm a ham radio op and ain't CPI. I love ham radio. But anyway, they didn't want to tie it all in. So they decided to call it WECA. They get the posters made up. They get everything wrote up. And then they have these second thoughts on WECA, right?
On the name.
So Phil Bellinger thinks, well, let's call it. He thinks about it. And this is where, history and me ad-libbing and, could go off center a little bit, but he comes up with the name Wi-Fi, okay? And he employs as WECA an ad agency in New York called Interbrand, and they fed a bunch of names back to Phil, and he picked Wi-Fi. So whether he picked it, gave it to them, they gave it back to him, I don't know, but we ended up with Wi-Fi, okay? And I'm around at the time, and I'm thinking, oh, hi-fi, Wi-Fi, that's a stupid damn name, because hi-fi is what you put in old radios of the 50s, high fidelity, right? Well, there's no fidelity. I mean, I got a Martin guitar down here on the floor. That's got fidelity, but Wi-Fi is bits and bytes. There's no fidelity. It's dumb name. Well, it doesn't mean fidelity. It just means it's just a catchy name.
Sounds
Live
good.
with it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, right?
Good story.
And for a small period of time, I think the Wi-Fi Alliance actually said the standard in fidelity for wireless, but it was never meant to be fidelity, right? And some people, engineering people, are like, just call it 802.11. Why do you have to call it Wi-Fi? Maybe Wi-Fi stands for wireless internet for idiots. In other words, when you're an engineer, you're like, you call it by what it is. You don't call it by your marketing name, right? So so it went round and round, right? But anyway, we get Wi-Fi, and we get some interoperability. Now companies are making things that talk to each other, finally. Well, once that happens, Microsoft, just like Kroger did a bake-off, Microsoft decided, well, we're going to do a bake-off too. We're going to do a pilot program here at Microsoft, and we're going to invite all these wireless people to come in. And there were a lot of them. I don't know who showed up at the party, but you had AT&T Lucent, you had 3Com, you had a lot of people that were making Symbol, other people making these things, right? So I do this bake-off, and the guy that I originally conned into going to Aeronet, Mark Tomaszewski, he goes on a clandestine mission. They go out there to do this bake-off or proof of concept. And Microsoft looks at us like, wow, it's like a cordless phone for your computer. This is awesome. This stuff rocks, right? And they choose us for their pilot. And that was, to put a date on it, let's see, January 15th, 2000, Microsoft gives us this little plaque saying, way to go for, for our pilot, cool. Right? So to put a date on that, January 15th, 2000. Another little company that's got their fingers in Microsoft and everywhere else on earth is Cisco, right? Cisco, here's who rocks. Next thing you know, Cisco in March of 2000 decides to merge Aeronet. You know, they acquire Aeronet and bring them into the fold. There's the little, you know.
That's
Now, at the time that happened, you know, I'm sitting on top of the world at Aeronet. You know, I'm doing my little thing and I'm having fun, and we're, I had transferred, but by the time that stuff happened, Telxon, the original parent company of all of this, they were having some problems and things. And I called my friend Mark, and he gave me a lifeline. I went over to Aeronet, you know, the place I had put in, right? So now I'm at Aeronet, and I'm liking this, and Cisco's about to buy us, and I'm thinking, I didn't agree to be an internet plumber. I don't want to do, you know, what the hell are we doing here? You know, I want to do radio. That's my thing, you know. And they're like, yeah, but, you know, you got an awful lot of stock options coming up. And I'm like, we're not public. And, well, little did I know, back in 1999, July, just before Cisco started all this, Aeronet went public at $11 a share. You know, nobody told me that. Well, Cisco buys us, and all of a sudden I find out, God, Fred, you've got tons of stock options at $2 and $4 and $6 a share or so. And I'm like, wow, so I can turn $2 into what Cisco's selling their stock today for. Well, hot damn, pay off the house, buy the house next door, we're all good. You know, I like this place, right? Yeah. And I ended up being there for 25 years.
Yes.
Because the seniority from Aeronet covered over. So I didn't introduce who I was in the beginning, but basically I'm a 25-year employee of Cisco Systems up until I just retired recently. And I'm a Hall of Fame speaker. I have 3 Cisco Pioneer Awards. Pioneer Awards are the things that Cisco, you know, makes a lot of crowing about. It means that you've done some awesome development kind of thing. And it was funny because I was going there for one of these things with Jim Florwick, who you guys know.
Of course, we know Jim.
And Jim Florwick used to be at NCR AT&T. You know, he was doing early Wi-Fi too, right? And I go, Jim, I'm going to get one of these damn plexiglass awards again. He goes, Fred. He goes, Fred. I'm like, what? He goes, that's fine crystal. That is not plexiglass. You know, but, you know, that's just got to be kind of thing, having fun, you know. And, you know, so anyway, all this happens, you know, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we get this all working. Cisco buys us. And what do you think the first thing out of Cisco's mouth was? Man, nobody knows. I'll tell you. Cisco looked at that AP and said, you know, that's a fine AP. I don't like the operating system that's on that. And we're like, we just went through and just got to do VX. What do you want on it? iOS.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Now all the engineers at Cisco Richfield, Ohio, need to learn how to program in iOS, right? And we start moving it all to iOS. And we go from this red labeled AP, which I'm going to throw over there because I can still throw APs, and to a Cisco AP.
Yes.
That runs iOS. The first iteration of that version of iOS was like a turtle with a rock in its mouth. You know, there was so much iOS code to, you know, switching and routing code and all of this code.
They call it spaghetti code, right?
AP,
spaghetti code.
Yeah, it's not, well, you can, I don't know if it's spaghetti code, but I will tell you that when you're trying to put an operating system that supports everything on Earth into a little AP, that's a lot harder than something you wrote yourself on VxWorks or Stuart wrote and whatever.
Yeah.
So we come to the party with this thing in both in VxWorks iteration and in iOS iteration. So for a while we had both while we were learning and growing and all that. So we get this thing all running, get it working, get the darn thing out the door. And then we had clients. Now by this time, WECA is now Wi-Fi Alliance. We now have got clients. So not only do we have this Aeronet 11 meg client, but we follow it up with a .11 a 350 series card. I grabbed two of the same, a 350 series card, and then eventually a 802.11 ABG card. Okay, so we did an ABG card. Remember I mentioned Dell?
Yep.
You did, absolutely.
We started making them for Dell.
Nice.
I was like, well, there's a company out of my past, and so we started making products for Dell, and we kind of had that relationship just kind of maybe before the Cisco acquisition or right around. So they let us keep that for a while, and then as time progressed on, and it was funny because, like I said, we decided we needed something faster than 802.11b.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the standard ratified 802.11a and b. A never took off at that time.
No, because it was the frequency was the reach was shorter because the frequency was higher, and then you needed to have more radios to cover the same building. So it was in fact more expensive.
Well, that would be a good argument why we didn't do it. But the real reason we didn't do it was cost. Nobody made a damn 5 gig chipset, and we had to do one, right? So we looked around, and in 2001, Cisco acquired a company called Radiata.
Okay.
Radiata was overseas, and that got us the very first A radios. So now we've got A radios and B radios. And a product that comes along about that time is the 1240.
Yeah, I remember this one.
This one had 2.4 on top, 5 gig on the bottom.
Yeah.
And it was the first time you could do something like cover two different areas. I could have, a patch or directional antenna go down a hallway in a hospital on 5 gig and cover the room on 2.4, and vice versa. It gave you lots of abilities.
Yeah.
But this was one radio per band. Mm-hmm. So this AP only had one Wi-Fi radio in it. Just like this original one only had one antenna. This, one radio, right? So we had an antenna on both, and the way that we did that was, if you're connected to this AP and you're having trouble, it's because of something called multipath or reflection.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to dive into this more, there's some old Cisco lives I've done called RF Fundamentals and the Design of Radio Networks, and I've done it for 10 years or whatever, so there's a bunch of different ones.
I've been there 3
and
times.
I say different things
yeah.
in there, but the takeaway is, radio signal hits this all as well. Radio signal hits metal object, and then it will cancel out.
Yeah, multipath
so
distortion.
it can either be, it's called distortion or destructive interference.
Yeah.
There's constructive interference and destructive. Constructive is when it bounces at just the right, so you get it twice, and it's twice as strong. You actually got it a lot better. So you can get it good, you can get it a lot better, or you can get it horrible if it reflects, right? So the way you fix that is you have another antenna, you physically move. I mean,
Diversity.
The customer could fix that if they would just move, but you're not going to get them to move their cart, their hospital cart, or their laptop.
Yeah.
Those carts were called computers on wheels, cows.
Cows, yes,
And then
I
all of a sudden, it's like, who you calling a cow? So they had to turn around and make up some better names, more politically correct names. But anyway, to fix the problem, you vote antennas, okay? That's how they did that.
Yeah.
So in the .11a and G's, you did that. And we came out with different versions. Some of them had internal antennas. This thing was codenamed SOAP. It was basically an 1100, and it just sat in a cradle, and but all of this was powered over Ethernet, along with this newer version, 350.
Yeah.
Well, these 350s
Which was also still pre-standard power over Ethernet, right? It was still Cisco inline power.
It was pre-standard, but it was one of the very first devices to take Ethernet power. Yeah. And the injector was kind of a mess. It looked like this. You had a power source, and then you had a in and an out, but one radio, it drew 6 watts. Wow. 6 watts.
That's it.
I mean, we got APs now that are pushing 30 watts or so, right? Because they got a lot more radios. Part of the problem with this technology was you could vote, but you still only had one antenna,
Wow.
Well, That was dot 11, A, B, and G.
So with that,
Once we-
Fred, let me pause you here because this is
Sure.
so good material, and we are only on the early stages of Wi-Fi, but we're already at at our time. So I'm proposing that we actually gonna continue on a second episode. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with anything you want to do, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so I want to thank.
So we're going to pick it up. We're going to pick it up on the next series with me explaining a little bit about what we did with .11n going forward and how we overcome the 1 and 2 antenna challenge. Now with that, let's maybe hit a few other questions you might have before we completely run out of time.
We are already out of time, so I'm going to take those questions into the next episode. So thank you very much. Thank you, Fred. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you, Sophia.
Sounds great.
See you.
Thank you.
All right. See
All
ya.
right. Bye.